So, welcome to ELT in Chile, a podcast about teaching English in Chile. In this space, Kevin and I interview and talk to teacher trainers, and academics who like to share their experiences and expertise in various aspects of English language teaching in Chile and globally. In this video episode, we'll be talking to Jasper Roe, who will be talking about generative AI and its impact in education and research. So, Kevin, please.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Jasper Roe has a background in English language education, computational linguistic analysis, sociology, and discourse analysis. Jasper's research interest covers the relationships and interactions between education, language, and society, as well as the ways that new technologies, such as artificial intelligence, are impacting education and scholarly practice. Before joining Durham, Jasper held senior academic leadership positions in both Vietnam and Singapore, overseeing the delivery of pathway programs for thousands of students studying for international qualifications, as well as teaching on a wide variety of undergraduate and postgraduate modules and conducting research. Jasper holds a BA in English language and an MA and PhD in social sciences, as well as a PG Cert in education and Cambridge certificates in English language teaching. Jasper spent time as an examiner for high-stakes international English examinations and as a teacher trainer for large-scale internationally funded campaigns to promote digital literacy among state school educators in Vietnam. Jasper is a senior fellow of advanced higher education, and at present, Jasper's research focuses on promoting critical digital literacy in the era of generative artificial intelligence through frameworks such as AI Assessment Scale, of which he is a co-creator. His work can be found in multiple leading international journals as well as in international news outlets. Well, Jasper, welcome to this podcast. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And if you're happy to just start right away with the first question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that introduction, Kevin. I'm sorry that bio is exceedingly long. That's why I laughed. I was thinking, oh no, I got to cut this down. But yeah, that's definitely that's the long and short of my career so far. But yeah,
well, thank
you so much. Well done for getting through that mouthful. Yeah, let's just begin. Yeah.
All right, lovely, thank you. Jasper, your work focuses on how generative AI is reshaping educational research. From your perspective, what are the biggest opportunities AI offers to researchers and teachers today?
Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of look at what generative AI is, because in some ways it's a continuation of existing patterns that we've had with educational technology, and in some ways it's completely new. So I think we've always had these new technologies that arrive, and then they present us with potentially some benefits, some things that we can do, and then potentially some risks. And they've always existed, but generative AI to some extent is a major development because one, it's so quick, it's so quickly gone from GPT-3 to today, and the capabilities as well, they do seem to be expanding as well. So it's not just language, but now it's multimodal. So I suppose in terms of the advantages, there's lots of potential advantages that we have for teaching. I mean, obviously, the main thing that people look at is things like planning lessons, organizing activities, enabling students, especially English as a foreign language students, to have those conversations, that language practice. Whether it's authentic language practice or not is a different matter. But I mean, for me, I personally use it for things like foreign language queries and practicing. So I practice Vietnamese using ChatGPT. Those are the big advantages that I see. But at the same time, I think those are fairly interesting and fairly modest advantages. But there are some really big questions and challenges that are arising now that I feel we don't have and won't have the answer for a long time. And to me, the single biggest concern is the fact that AI models, despite the fact that things like they call it hallucinations, right, are getting better, they're still not fully reliable. And it seems that we are becoming reliant on them, or it seems a lot of students are reliant on them.
Yeah.
And I worry a lot about what that will do to learner agency, learner autonomy, and really knowledge accumulation in the long term.
Yeah. No, I think these are very, very interesting and also very accurate observations in terms of the downsides. You said something quite interesting at the very beginning, that we need to understand how generative AI works actually to know what it can do and what the limitations of it are. Could you spare a few more words on that? Just because I find this really interesting to look at what generative AI actually does, what it is.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just start by saying that I'm not a software developer and I'm not an expert in the technical side of AI. My background was always in linguistics, and so we did focus a lot on corpus linguistics, so building big databases of text and then using that to look at language patterns. So there's some similarity there, but I'm not a technical expert. But what I do know from reading and research is that they're essentially probabilistic. That means that when you hear people say, "Oh, it's just like autocorrect, it's looking for the next word in the pattern," I mean, that is a very simplified way of talking about how these models work. The reality is that they're looking at these extremely complicated relationships between billions and billions of words, and they are producing the most probabilistic output. So in some way, you have to remember that it's not. There's no notion of truth underpinning the things that are coming out, right? Just very good guesses, essentially. And so that's a thing that I worry that people might not understand because it sounds so convincing. And a lot of the time, information that you ask for is correct. It seems like the model is working out the correct answer, but that's not really the case. So that, I think, is the key thing about how generative AI works. To be aware of that it is based on probability, essentially.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like I guess like you're saying, something that you said, Jasper, was related, like maybe that you worry that maybe learner agency maybe would suffer the consequences of maybe the wide use of generative AI. Can you would that be like one of the main areas that has been affected, let's say, by generative AI in terms of maybe teaching and learning? Like, can you maybe mention some other areas that you think that this may affect how teaching and learning happen? Maybe in our case, maybe in language education or in English as a foreign language.
Sure. So I think there's a few things that are specific to foreign language education. One of the things that I am slightly concerned about is that in English language education, we've had this move towards multilingualism, towards translanguaging, towards using all of the resources that learners have at their disposal, right? And then if we look towards AI models as a source of kind of idealized or perfect language, do we limit ourselves? Do we limit our ability to use a range of all our linguistic resources, right? Or do we privilege the model texts that we get from language models? And yes, while language models, a lot of them are multilingual, there are many languages which will never be able to have a generative AI language model because simply not enough text exists to train a model. So there are some concerns about sort of knowledge effects, bias. We know that Gen AI models do tend towards Western bias. That's fairly well documented. And these things are all entangled in language learning, right? Because language learning is not a simplistic thing where we're just learning vocabulary. We're learning many different skills all at once, including a layer of knowledge that goes along with that, with those linguistic resources.
Yeah.
So that would be my other thing, my other area that I think is interesting and also troublesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I've been reading your recent book, How to Use Generative AI in Educational Research, and while this book looks at how people should use maybe generative AI responsibly. maybe in a nutshell, because I'm probably you talk about like many different principles and many areas. So let's say what would be like the main areas, or maybe what principles do you think that maybe teachers and researchers should keep in mind when trying to integrate a generative AI into their work?
Yeah, thanks, Jose. I think principles are really important
Yeah.
because, especially when I was writing this book, I knew that it was going to be out of date by the time it was published. That's just how the field is moving, right? And true enough, as soon as I published it, like the next day GPT-5 came out, I was like, okay, great. So principles are really important when the field is moving so quickly.
Yeah.
I think mainly we need to focus on transparency.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we know, not necessarily every detail, like every prompt that you've used, but what are the functions that you've used AI for,
Yeah.
and what are the associated potential risks that come with that? Like, did you just take a load of information and then rely on this in doing some data analysis or doing some sort of research project? If so, that's a massive risk, and we need to know about it. On the other hand, if you say I just used it for proofreading my final manuscript, that's a very different matter. So you need, if you're going to use AI to help you with research, you need to document how you used it. Of course, I don't think there's any need to go into extreme amounts of detail,
Yeah.
but you do need to have a transparent approach. The other thing that I think is really important is taking responsibility for the overall product. That is a major thing. You need to accept that if there's something wrong with this work, you are the author, you're responsible for it. Ultimately, that comes down to you. And that's one of the key things that I say, like, be careful if you're going to try and use Gen AI to help with something, because Gen AI is unreliable, and there's a chance that you'll actually end up making more work for yourself. If you have to go through and verify every piece of information that you get. So I'd say those are the key ones, really: transparency and responsibility.
Absolutely, especially like in the area that you say that new models are coming out, let's say, every couple of months now. So probably like those two core principles, I think that those are great. I don't know if you want to say something, Kevin.
No, I think this is extremely fascinating and very important what you just said, Jasper, because, well, this brings us right into critical digital literacy, I think, a set of principles, knowing how to use AI, what it does, and also like maintaining a what I hope high level of human agency over the work. So critical digital literacy is one of your key research areas. Why do you think this skill is so important for teachers and students today, especially with AI tools becoming more common in classroom? And this is a two-layered question. Now, AI is there to stay, I think. So how can we still ensure that students don't lose key thinking skills?
Yeah, that is a two-layered question.
It is.
I,
Sorry.
I don't have a perfect answer, but I'll do my best. I think critical digital literacy is important for the same reason that digital literacy has been important for a long time, right? We need to be able to discern good information from bad information, and that's something that is essentially a timeless skill. But the way in which we deploy that skill is changing. And as we expect more and more, in one paper we call it this digital plastic, these generative artifacts start to appear everywhere, we need to kind of cultivate that skill of not just taking everything that we see at face value. And I'm just thinking about things like synthetic images. I mean, I've been fooled by AI images. I don't know if you ever have.
Yes.
It's getting harder and
Yeah.
it's getting more difficult. And I worry that if it might sound simple to some people. They might say, well, sure, we need to train students on how to recognize this, but it's not actually that easy to do. So we need to have a real concerted effort towards dealing with these things, having critical digital literacy programs that can support us, to discern good from bad information. And I think that's going to get more important as this digital plastic continues to grow. And the second part of your question was, could you remind me?
I was going to say, let me repeat that. The second part was how can we ensure, we as educators and also we as researchers, that students don't lose these key thinking skills?
Yeah, so I speak to a lot of teachers about AI,
Yeah.
and one really common issue that comes up is teachers will say to me, well, look, I'm not an AI expert.
Mhm.
I don't need to know much about this. I don't really want to know much about this. Why do I have to teach students about it?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I think that is quite a valid point, because depending on your subject, maybe there isn't much need for you to become an expert on this new technology. But at the same time, we need to be aware that, well, your students are going to be using it.
Yeah.
And in your role as a teacher, if there is something so significant that's going to play a big role in their education, you do have to address it at some point. So no one's saying that you have to be an expert on it, but you do need, I would say, a baseline level of awareness, of literacy around what these things can do. So one, you can support learners to use it appropriately and meaningfully. And secondly, so that you are aware and don't make decisions yourself that could unfairly harm learners. So for example, with AI text detectors, there'd be many documented cases online of teachers not really understanding how accurate or effective these detectors are, and then using them to punish students. And we just shouldn't have that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yes, it does indeed. And it's also super interesting what you said about teachers' proficiency, because this reminds me very much of a discussion that we are having in the area of critical pedagogy, critical thinking skills, really, where teachers, where you sometimes hear the argument that, well, I'm teaching a subject, so they need to know I don't know, I teach English, so it's more important for my students to know the simple past and the present perfect than to actually, apply critical thinking in the classroom. That's something that universities should do.
Yeah.
But there seems to be quite some parallels, especially with this gap between, shall we say, technology resistant. I'm not sure if it's technology resistant, but like technology less savvy teachers, and super like teachers who have a very much high interest in technology. So I think this is like also perhaps a generational gap there.
Yeah.
That is super interesting to address.
Yeah, I think there's a really wide range of different attitudes, and I think it's not just about um, necessarily generations, but it's also about some people just have a preference
Yeah.
for engaging with technology more in learning. And I've met a lot of people from across the spectrum who hate Gen AI and want it completely out of the way and will not even entertain the idea of it being remotely valuable, to those who say, well, it's going to fully replace us and we should just get ready for that. And I think that's why it's such a tricky and polarizing subject. Yeah, it is hard, because I think if we take the idea that students just need to know the grammatical structures, or just need to know the very mechanistic aspects of language. I mean, personally, that's not my view of how language works.
No, by all means.
Yeah, yeah.
By
So
all means.
I guess what I mean is that teachers should engage with this to an extent, right? I think we shouldn't just try and block it out of the classroom.
Yeah.
But I think it's fine to be critical, and I think it's fine to resist some aspects if you're resisting for the right reasons. But I'm really a pragmatist, and I think we shouldn't take these extreme positions where we either ban or fully embrace, but we should have a principled approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
especially in language learning, because I do think there's benefits for language learners and language teachers.
Yeah. I mean, there is one area here that maybe sometimes like there is a discussion in Congress now, maybe of banning cell phones in the classroom here in Chile, and this is I think it's going to be like really difficult to find like some common ground, because imagine that's like an extreme. It would be like trying to ban computers, and I think
Yeah.
it's in that area. I think like maybe as you're saying, like maybe not any extreme is good. And also like Kevin and I, we also maybe as you said, we work in corpus linguistics when there is an area where people start saying like, oh no, technologies again, like I don't know, I need time, I need time to learn how to use it. And many people start like maybe feeling overwhelmed because there's such a vast array of different tools. And I think like we have come across like the concept, or maybe the idea, that many language teachers would want to introduce AI, maybe tools, generative AI, but they feel like really overwhelmed. They don't know what to do, where to start, or maybe how to deal with this. So that would be my next question, Jasper. What advice would you give educators who are just beginning, maybe to explore, or maybe trying to maybe find some maybe tools, maybe for teaching, classroom support, or any any areas? And I think overwhelmed, that would be a good adjective to describe the current landscape.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I mean, I also at times feel overwhelmed and definitely get AI fatigue,
Yeah.
at some point you're just like, I've got to stop and go for a walk because
Yeah.
there's so much,
Yeah.
AI argument and research and news and posts all the time. It is overwhelming. So I would say that probably if you're a teacher and you want to start getting to grips with this subject, then the key is really to start reading. But within that, I would say it's important to read on both sides of the arguments.
Hmm.
It's important to be, fairly open-minded at first and try
Mhm.
and look at not just the positive perspectives and the facts and figures from the large AI companies that say, oh,
Mhm.
it's done this, it's done this, it's
Yeah.
personalizing learning, it's benefiting, blah, blah, blah. But also look at the critical perspectives and those who are really resisting
Yeah.
um, the use of AI. So there's quite a lot of good scholarship that is actually explicitly critical of AI technologies, and that can be an interesting place to start. You can find that in some of the journals, like I think it's Learning, Media, and Technology, or Critical Studies in Education. Uh, and then at the same time, for me, I get most of my information on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
which seems to have become one of the major social networking sites for academic stuff
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So I try and follow people on both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
Academics, people in the corporate world, leading figures in AI. I find that's quite a nice way to sort of stay up to date
Yeah.
and get an overview of what's going on.
Hmm.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Because I think, yeah, people need to start somewhere. And of course, like the biggest companies, they get like maybe like as you're saying, like on LinkedIn, you have posts by OpenAI and explaining the new features. And they start rolling and saying, yeah, you should try this, you should try that. But probably there are now hundreds of new products that don't even get the exposure that maybe that they
Mm.
may get, like that big companies may get. So I think that also makes a difference.
I think it's also important to keep in mind that these are companies.
Sure.
Companies want to sell a product, right?
Yes.
We've had
Yeah.
this discussion many times around course books,
Yeah.
who all promise
Yes.
linguistic and educational heaven. And unfortunately, research shows that this claim is not always supported when you analyze a textbook. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is super interesting. It's also something to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
Anyway, now this actually brings us quite nicely, I hope so, into transition to look more at research than teaching.
Yeah.
It's like education research methods are evolving quickly with AI tools. Jasper, you mentioned LinkedIn. I've been following a discussion about how much should we use AI when publishing? How much should editors use AI in
Proofreading.
starting review, proofreading, and all of that? So there's a massive debate there. What changes do you foresee in how researchers collect, analyze, and interpret data, and also, I would add, publish data in the near future?
Yeah, that's a good point. Uh, Publishing is obviously, and I mean, most academics who you speak to will now have had at least some experience or know someone who's had an experience of maybe getting a review back and they think that it's been AI written.
Yeah.
Or they've read a paper and they've strongly suspected that this was AI written. And it's a massive issue because there's not really any great way to discern how much or how someone has used AI in, polishing a manuscript or doing more of the research through an AI model. There's not really any good way of knowing that. So that's really concerning. There have been lots of posts about, for example, academic articles where partway through there's a sentence that says, as a large language model, I cannot. And then it's like, well, what do you do with that information? Because is that just that they were rewriting a sentence and they forgot to leave it in, which is sloppy, but not, a terrible offense necessarily? Or is it that they just handed off doing all the hard research work to the AI model? I mean, I think that's another key challenge, and the landscape is going to change a lot. So one area is, for example, in research data, I think we're going to see clearer norms about what you can and can't do. For example, uploading sensitive or confidential data to AI models. I think there will be a clearer sort of prohibition on that. I think everyone will agree, like, look, that's a terrible idea because ultimately it's just transporting data to a web-based platform and you don't really know what's going on with that data, so you better not. I think there'll be new debates about then, for example, can you run local Gen AI models and use them for analyzing data? And I can't really see why that wouldn't be possible. So that might be where we move. Academic publishing, I mean, you have to wonder if manuscripts are going to change, or if we're going to start seeing more and more formulaic versions of a genre of text that's already really formulaic. Or maybe things will swing the other way and they'll start to say, put some human voice, put some authenticity, put some uniqueness into your writing. I don't know. So I think in some areas it's going to consolidate. There's going to be some clearer norms. In other areas, I'm not so sure. Yeah, I don't really see how this field of scholarship is going to develop. But clearly there will have to be some significant change, because we can't have this situation getting so out of control that every research article is just sounding like a formulaic piece of fabricated work. So yeah, it's a scary time in that regard.
It is. And also, I think directly links in with critical thinking, critical digital sorry, I just completely lost the word. Literacy, that was the word. Because as a researcher, I'm not really sure that overusing AI or completely relying on AI does actually do much to the creation of knowledge, to your independence, to the authority that you have as the author of a manuscript, right? So I think this is quite, an interesting situation that definitely needs evaluation, constant evaluation.
I mean, that's a really good point, because I mean, the issue is that generative AI, you can make the argument that it can't really produce new knowledge, right? Or that it can't come up with new ideas. But then at the same time, there have been cases of things like AlphaFold discovering new forms of proteins, right? And or new protein fold. I'm not entirely sure on that, but there have been cases of AI like solving maths problems, for example, that were previously unsolved. So I have really mixed feelings on that. But one thing that I do know is that at the moment, what we do have in terms of AI is very limited compared to what we have in our own brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that you're right. We need to make sure that we are establishing the primacy of the human element
Mm-hmm.
in the creation of new knowledge, right?
Yeah,
After all,
especially.
it's humans who gave us AI, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's also important, I think, to maintain this human factor because, I mean, anyone just, being quite, shall we say, proficient in using prompts.
Yeah.
If I was very proficient in using prompts, that wouldn't make me an astrophysicist. But if I
Yeah.
was proficient enough to give a good prompt, then I could publish a paper in this area, which does definitely not reflect my skill set in research,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
by all means. So, yeah, that's interesting to see where we go with this and what we can do to actually mitigate potentially detrimental trends in this area.
Yeah, I think we should all be pretty concerned, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you're right. I don't think AI is going away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lots of people were saying we're going to hit a ceiling really soon. People have been saying that since the early days now, but it still
Yeah.
hasn't happened. If
Mm-hmm.
anything, the sort of war seems to be heating up between these big corporations now. But we are going to have to think, how do we live in a world where we have these technologies that can do these things that sometimes are amazing and sometimes just seem amazing but actually aren't, and
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to reshape our practices like in academia and learning and teaching? I don't really know, but it is going to have to change, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Well, slightly changing the topic. Equity and access are important issues, particularly in Latin America, in terms of research, in terms of language resources. What do you think are some ways AI could help either reduce or increase inequalities in education?
Yeah, it's again, that's another of these really important sort of big topics. So
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I think is interesting is in academic writing, there was a paper in I think it was PLOS One, and it was
Mm-hmm.
called "The Manifold Costs of Being a Non-Native English Speaker in
Mm.
Science." And in that paper, they described the amount of additional work that you have to go through to do things like publish research, participate in conferences, because it
Mm-hmm.
is um, almost entirely English language medium.
Yeah.
Most
Mm-hmm.
of the language of scientific publishing is English. So could the availability of AI help democratize that to some extent? Could it make it easier for
Mm-hmm.
researchers who need to compose manuscripts or need to publish research in English to spend less of their time on that and
Mm.
more of their time on the bits that matter
Yeah.
rather than the linguistic presentation necessarily?
Mm-hmm.
So there is an argument there that it could be democratizing in some way. It could lessen those barriers.
Yeah.
Um, and one thing I did say, I think, in the book is that it could even impact this thing that we have, gift authorships, where someone invites a researcher just to do some minor linguistic edits or
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
help tidy up the manuscript because they're better at doing that. So that's one area of potential democratization, but I think that's quite small, maybe
Mm.
quite fringe in comparison to the bigger issues of equality. Um, so, for example, we might see a situation where institutions, universities, schools who have the resources produce more AI competent or AI literate
Mm-hmm.
graduates, which, depending on how highly that's valued in the labor market, could lead to unequal outcomes, right?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the other area that I think is really important is if we talk about the digital divide in terms of geographical access.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
will you have to be located in, for example, the USA to benefit from the most cutting edge AI models in the future? And what does this mean for areas with less ability to access these models, especially not in the dominant language in that area. Like I say, there's some other research which has shown that there's not that many languages that it's possible to effectively train a large language model on. So that's another question for equality, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there, as you were saying, there is a feature, for example, of ChatGPT that offers a year free of charge for students who are, in the US or in Canada. But if you want to access this from Chile, that's not possible, and already that creates a big barrier. For example, and also as Kevin was saying, like they're selling a product, so they're basically trying to find new customers,
Yeah.
or also schools. In that sense.
Because what's the goal? The goal of that 1-year trial is to ultimately, is to get you is the customer acquisition cost, right?
Yeah.
Is they're going to let you have it for a year, but the goal is to have you keep using it, and preferably have you using it for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine that's the plan.
Yeah. And also, there at the beginning, Jasper, you were mentioning that many teachers are using generative AI to maybe plan lessons, to organize activities. Do you think that maybe, or can you maybe suggest or maybe provide us with maybe some other practical ways that you think language teachers could use generative AI? For example, in your book, you of course talk about educational research, but I don't know, can you think of maybe other areas that can be impacted, maybe in terms of language teaching, that maybe teachers can actually use them?
Yeah, I think from a very nuts and bolts perspective, we need to think about what these models do well.
Yeah.
And if, for example, you do want to teach a certain set of vocabulary, a certain grammatical rule, you want to come up with a set of questions just as an additional activity, Gen AI models are really, really good at that. They're really good at producing this sort of quite formulaic content. And I think that formulaic content does have a place in the classroom, and it can be used as a useful way to introduce activities or to create a jumping off point or for some sort of formative work. So I think those are really legitimate and beneficial uses. And that would be my main area that I think is important. Or for example, getting a text and asking for comprehension questions. Of course, you have to check it yourself, but I'm sure as you've both done this a lot, it can be really, really time consuming to create a very simple 5-minute reading task.
Yes.
And if you don't stay on top of that, then you spend 2 hours planning for a 1-hour lesson, and it becomes unmanageable. So there it could shoulder some work, I think.
Thank you.
How about you both? What do you think?
I think in that case, I think maybe like formulaic language, I think in those cases it's good, but when you get to maybe more advanced levels, it's very difficult. Or maybe you need to use some other extra tools if you want to use it. For example, text inspector to see if it's at the level like C1 or maybe, I don't know, B2 in that case. So you need to basically, as Kevin maybe says, we need to be really mindful of how we use it, if we actually use it, like in this case, maybe checking the level or making sure that we as experts, we actually see that this is the level. Or maybe in the comprehension questions, it's like, oh, but maybe this name is not even here. Why is this, ChatGPT, maybe inventing a new character in this story?
No, I think this is a really interesting question, and thanks for bouncing it back to us,
Yes.
Jasper.
I started off just kind of giving my long monologue answers, but then I thought, actually, this is a podcast. We should be chatting. I love
great.
True. Sorry.
No,
formulaic from me in the first.
No, not at all. I think using it pedagogically responsibly, shall we say, I think yes, for text creation, but we also need to be very much aware of the genre that we want to produce.
Yeah.
So what I've heard a lot from colleagues and teachers, my students as well, is it's a good way to train conversation. Well, using ChatGPT, no, that's a different mode. You're not actually speaking. It's a very artificial. It's a good way for you to understand a mock conversation, but it's not really an opportunity to practice authentic. And I think this is a really important word in this sense, to practice authentic communication or interaction, conversation. However, if you go, well, I've got a text, I need to shorten this text to make it into, I don't know, a 5 or 10 minute reading comprehension exercise, and I feed this into ChatGPT, ask it to summarize, make it a bit shorter. Well, yes, that can be done, and I think this is quite a nice and time saving way. But we still need to keep in mind that we need to proofread the text, make sure it still makes sense, to make sure it actually, we haven't altered the story or anything like that. So I think that's a big challenge, because I've seen people who have actually put a prompt like, oh, can you please create a 5-minute reading exercise with 10 questions for a B1 level learner, copy and paste into a Word document, print it off and take it to the classroom. And I think that is, well, I'm convinced that is not the way we should be using AI at all. It's just like blindly trusting it. So I think it depends very much on what we want to achieve. And we need to be very much aware that we don't just use it as a time-saving tool, but actually that we use it in a way that it becomes pedagogically and even ethically meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a really good point, and yeah, I do agree. The problem that we're going to have, I think, that the problem that we're facing already is you said ethically meaningful, and I think that's really kind of core, because when we do think about what uses are ethically appropriate, we have to balance so many different factors, and that includes, for example, some people are more concerned about things like the energy use of AI data centers and the environmental
impacts.
Yes. Some people are more concerned about the potential knowledge effects or the potential for bias and discrimination. A lot of people might not have any concerns and might just think from their perspective, I just need to fill 30 minutes in my class today, I'm going to use AI to do it. And I strongly suspect that's a very common sentiment. So we do have to balance all these different points. And I think, one of the things that came up for me when I was writing this book as well is sometimes I joke that it should have been called Don't Use Generative AI in Educational Research, because my kind of main point is like, yes, there are ways that it can be used and that it's going to be helpful in educational research projects, but only once you've been through this laundry list of stuff that you need to think about before you use it. Because it's a new technology and there's all these different things that we're aware of, and we don't have a full understanding yet of the long-term impacts. So yes, you can use it, and this is how you might use it, but only once you've considered A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A.
No, I mean, this is a really, really, really valuable point indeed. And something that I think we need to be aware of, not only as researchers, but also in the wider sense, like locating ourselves in an educational context, be that at university or at pre-tertiary level. On the other side of the discussion, however, I think the students, sit our learners, and taking this discussion perhaps a little bit towards that direction, and touching upon academic integrity. How could or should even schools and universities approach AI generated content in student work? Because I've had this experience where I got a bit of student writing, and I read it and I thought, well, it does sound nice as long as you don't think about the content, because the content is actually horrible. And I asked the students, like, what were you thinking? So I know I asked ChatGPT, and that's what came out. And it's like, you can't do that, because clearly you can't even explain your main argument. So I don't know, to give you an example, what I do is I ask for an AI statement where I want to know what AI program they used, for what they used it, and how this impacted their academic and linguistic production, which is maybe one way to make them think at least a little bit, they being the learners, a little bit about what they did if they used an AI massively. But what's your take on this? What can we do to actually, how can we deal with AI generated content inspire students?
Yeah. There's especially in language teaching, there's no silver bullets. There's no one thing that will solve it, and I think it's important that we recognize that. I think there's just better or worse practices. In terms of the better practices, I think we need validation of some learning outcomes through, circumstances where AI is not allowed or AI cannot be used. So we need to consider things like presentations, like group discussions, like vivas, like oral examinations. These are not new forms of assessment. We've always seen these as valuable, and I think they do have a role to play, and we need to, maintain that role and perhaps even in some cases increase it. We need to give very clear guidance to students on exactly why they should/shouldn't use AI for an assessment. And in some cases, we should encourage students to use AI for some forms of assessment. In an ideal world, every educator would be able to redesign, they'd have the time and the space and the support available to redesign their assessments, to have this balance of some tasks that use AI, some tasks that don't use AI, some tasks that you have a limited use of AI. And for those who can do that, that's great. And that's the best practice we should be aiming for. Unfortunately, that doesn't reflect the reality for a lot of people. But in which case, I would say it's always better to do something than doing nothing. Better to do something than nothing. There you go. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do within your remit, within your institution, within your context, then do that. Is the best approach that I think we can take for now.
Now, I also think, I fully agree with you, and I also think there's a lot of fishing in muddy waters going on at universities these days, because over the last 2 years I've had the pleasure of being at 3 different universities, and it does not, in different capacities, so it does not seem to, there doesn't seem to be one unifying way forward, because I would say almost every faculty, every lecturer, every whatever teaching staff, research staff, they're all trying to find like some way, a way forward to deal with AI, and to, some sanction a bit more, others encourage a bit more. So there seems to be no consensus on how we deal with AI produced content in student work.
Yeah, there isn't really a consensus. I think what we do have a consensus on, from what I've seen, is that we all want students to be the best that they can be, and we all want students to be as ready for the future as they can be.
Absolutely.
And so that lends itself to embracing AI in some ways. And I think pretty much every person in academia who I've spoken to, they see at least some value, some role in AI training being available. The other area that I think there is consensus is that everyone seems to agree that we need to have secure ways of validating learning outcomes, because we need to know the learner's true ability when we, give them a grade, give them a degree, give them a credential. But those are the big headline consensus areas. How do we get to that is where you find a lot of varying perspectives.
And a lot of not knowing, I would suppose.
Yeah. And
but I think the good thing, the really positive thing, is that even though there is a lot of debate, disagreement, even controversy, I mean, you can see just how much the entire sector does care about this, and does care about things like creating a level playing field, creating an equal environment, creating meaningful learning opportunities, creating meaningful assessments. So that's kind of the silver lining, I guess.
No, and this perfectly brings us actually to the last question that I've got for you, Jasper. A very simple question, or very simple. No, it's actually terribly complex, but I tried to simplify it. So what's next? Specifically, what emerging research questions or areas of research do you think will be most important to address for the next generation of educational researchers and language teachers if we just accept that AI is here to stay and potentially will grow in future?
What's next? I think that's
Exactly. What's next?
Yeah.
That's the. It is not a simple. It's a short question, but I think it's a terribly complex question there.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think we're still in this very early. So one thing is there's so much scholarship on Gen AI, on ChatGPT, and I think that's actually a really good thing.
Yeah.
Lots of people are just saying, "Oh, it's just because it's a popular subject. It'll attract attention." But no, we do need as much scholarship as we can on this subject. We need to get that evidence base together, and we should be doing it in different contexts, with different methodologies. We should be aiming to gather. We're early on in the project, and we're gathering data. And so the more data that we gather, probably the better it'll be as we start to see whether consensuses emerge on some practices. So with that in mind, I think we need to really find out about the different ways that learners are using AI. And there's a lot of research on that already, but it's very difficult to actually examine how learners are using AI because I think it's quite a private thing, right? We can interview and we can do surveys. So maybe some long-term sort of ethnographic work, if you could do it, to look at how students or how learners are really engaging with AI, what they use it for, and understanding those motivations. I think we need a lot of student voice representation in what they think is the way forward, and especially when I've come across lots of cases of students who have been unfairly penalized by AI detection. And so I think that highlights how important it is to not just go towards technological solutions without thinking them through or without adequate training, etc. We need to really think from the student's perspective. And so anything from the student's perspective, I think, is valuable.
Yeah.
Where next, I think things are going to keep developing. There's no necessarily clear ceiling that's been reached yet. It'll be interesting maybe we could have a conversation this time next year and see how things have changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be yes.
Yeah.
That'd be great, actually.
Yeah, in a year, many things can happen, especially in the area of AI or generative AI. Like things are moving fast.
I was going to say, next year you can probably talk to my AI chatbot with my face.
We don't
on
even have
West
to
Time.
meet.
Well, we just released a study actually last week where we asked students and teachers, how would you feel about being taught by an AI avatar?
Oh, wow.
Because we thought, well, that could be on the horizon. I'm sick today. I'm going to send in my AI avatar. How would students feel about that? They weren't so happy, and neither were educators. But there's the critical question.
Yeah.
Will companies see this as a market opportunity and try and change that perception or try and lean us towards using this?
That, yeah.
And think about the financial aspect of that.
Yeah.
Buying an avatar once or paying a teacher, 250 days a year.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Absolutely.
Well,
Please,
we should
Kevin,
probably...
don't.
I was going to say, let's
don't
delete
give
this.
any
Let's delete
ideas.
this from... No, but it's, I think, something to happen. I mean...
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something, this question will come up at one point. Think about something really interesting, unrelated to language education, but something really interesting that I read the other day was one-man cockpits in aeroplanes.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, technologically it's possible. Workload management-wise, it's possible for one pilot to actually pilot an airliner. Would I want to be on board that aeroplane? Oh, by all means, I would not. I wouldn't even get close to that. But this is also something that's highly impacted by the industry, and it's a massive. I mean, paying one pilot or paying two pilots, it does reflect on the bottom line. And if a safety-relevant profession like that is already under scrutiny for reduction, what's going to happen to teachers?
Yeah.
No, I
You
think
know
it's
what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's also something to maybe, I don't know. I hope it's not going to go that far, but
we'll see. Maybe in
something
a
to think
year.
about.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And now we
perhaps.
have our maybe a question from the audience by Piotr Maliki. His question is: the integration of AI in education opens exciting possibilities for research. So his question is: what insights could we actually gain by blending human creativity with AI analysis? Do you see any positive points, or maybe what do you think that it's actually possible to blend that?
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the data that you have available, what kind of study you're doing, what kind of research. I think if we consider it on an individualized basis, I've found using AI helpful not in doing analysis, but certainly in teaching me the certain steps that I need to do in some sort of method. So I'm not very good as a quantitative researcher.
Yeah.
But what I have found is that in guiding me how to get through some steps of quantitative research, it's been really helpful. So maybe that could be one of those potential benefits. I don't necessarily think that we might get some unexpected output that you couldn't just get with a human, but could it help create some efficiency, help with the process, help us become better researchers? I think possibly, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So I don't think we have any more questions for you, Jasper. Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, it's been a really good conversation. Thank you for having me.
I know. So again,
Thanks for accepting our invitation. That was very enjoyable, very insightful as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. And with this, we conclude today's episode. And maybe we'll meet again next year, Jasper, to see how far we have gone.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So with this, we conclude our episode today. So if you have any questions or comments, you can reach us at podcast@eltinchile.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And you can visit our website, www.eltinchile.com. So Jasper, thank you very much again. And Kevin, we'll be in touch.